All right. Well, my name is Katerina Burianova, and I am a licensed architect in the state of California. And not only am I a licensed architect, but I also study Vastu Shastra, which Vastu Shastra is an ancient Vedic science. You may be familiar with yoga, Ayurveda. It's one of those Vedic sciences, and Vastu Shastra is the science of structures. So back before, Western culture came to India, and that we would call what today's architecture in India, they would design homes according to Vastu Shastra principles. And now, this dates back thousands of years. There's really not exactly a specific origin date. And throughout the, centuries, it has evolved and evolved. And what it is, and it depends also what part of India you go to, that learn about it from different ways. And I guess I should also talk about, how I came about learning about Vastu Shastra before I talk about the history of it. But so how Vastu Shastra, how I, an architect in California, heard about it was a couple years ago when I was studying for my architecture exams. I was really struggling through the exams, and there was a seminar that I went to with a girl named Sahara Rose, and she teaches a lot of Ayurvedic principles. And it was at her seminar, she was talking about, finding your dharma as well, which is your soul's purpose, and combining things that you are passionate about, that you love to, do in life. And for me, that was architecture and yoga. I've been practicing yoga for about a decade now. And I wrote, architecture and yoga down on a piece of paper. And I thought, how are these two things going to be combined? Am I going to be designing yoga studios? I don't really want to just design yoga studios. And so through listening to like Sahara talk about, your passions, and then somehow, through social media and through the internet, I, came upon Vastu Shastra, which is, it is architecture, but it also has to do with the spirituality, the energies that kind of incorporate yoga. And so that's really how I've incorporated yoga and architecture into my life, by studying Vastu Shastra. And there's a quote I found once where Vastu is like yoga for your home. You're balancing the energies of your home. So it's like you're on your yoga mat, you're balancing, and Vastu is just balancing the energies in your home. So then going back to Vastu Shastra is so it goes back, thousands of years, and it's really the study of energies within the home. And so when you look at, your home, it also goes based off of the five elements, the cardinal directions, as well as um, the planets and deities, which the planets and deities, the way I've been studying Vastu is with more of a modern approach, less of the, the astrological, the deities, the gods and goddesses. That's not exactly where I'm focused. I'm more focused on the modernization of Vastu, especially living in a Western culture. When I apply Vastu principles, I have to keep in mind that I'm approaching it in a different part of the world than where it originated from. So certain principles may not make sense. Certain locations of rooms and spaces may not make sense because I'm applying a Western design to a Eastern science.
That's
So
great. It's great. It's interesting how we kind of have flipped experiences slightly. Because I started out in that world. I've been a holistic practitioner for over 20 years, and I, taught yoga for a long time, and studied pranayama and a lot of the Vedic and the yogic philosophies and sciences, in addition to Reiki and sound healing and shamanic practices. And I've always been very strongly influenced by sound. And I started to think about the concepts of sound and sound in terms of space and acoustics, and how just subtle shifts in our environment, specifically with acoustics, can really change the energy of a space and how we respond to a space, whether it's, noise or music being pumped through or something like that. So I wanted to see how I could support human beings in their physical built environment. I'd always been aware of Feng Shui, and I had dabbled in it for several years. And then I wanted to kind of get into the nuts and bolts of building and architecture. So I started working at an architecture firm, and I learned about the Well and the Fitwell certifications and got accredited in both of those. And once I did that, kind of finished a little bit more of the scientific aspects of wellness design consulting. I was like, okay, now I get to study Feng Shui. This is like, this is like my reward to get back into the metaphysical and the esoteric and that aspect of it. And similarly to Vastu, Feng Shui goes back thousands of years. It's a Taoist healing art. So along with Chinese medicine and acupuncture, it's considered one of the Taoist healing arts. And it was originally developed for people whose family members had passed to determine what is the best burial site for this person in the afterlife. So Feng Shui has changed over the years, and there are two different practices of Feng Shui. There is a Bagua and a Feng Shui for those who have passed, and then there's a Bagua and a Feng Shui for those who are living. And obviously, people who have passed and people who are living require, much different environments to spend the rest of their days in. Feng Shui is also very based on the elements and elemental balance, balancing the elements and energies in your home. And essentially, one of the foundations is attracting beneficial chi, which would be prana or energy, and having it circulate beneficially through your home. So energy can be stagnant, energy can be balanced, and energy can be overactive. So it would be just inviting and encouraging beneficial energy to circulate through your home. There's a few different types of Feng Shui. A lot of them are compass method, which like Vastu is based on north, south, east, west, the directions. I practice a style that's called BTB, Feng Shui, which the method for that is aligning what's called the Bagua on the entrance to the property or the entrance to the home or the entrance to the room, or whatever way kind of the usage is facing. The Bagua can scale, so you could apply the Bagua to your desk or your bookshelf, which is possibly how they originally placed it in terms of landforms rather than the compass.
Interesting. Yeah, no, and the Vastu I also have been studying is like circular, so like a compass as well with the directions. There is a form of Vastu where it becomes 9 squares, and instead of the directions, which I'm not very familiar with that Vastu, I should note. So I'm also more of a north, south, east, west, and then I'm sure we'll show the Vastu Chakra, which shows all of the directions because we actually, or in Vastu, there's 16 directions. Again, depends on which Vastu you're learning about from, well, which is something I've been noticing as well. And I took a course a couple months ago where we really talked about there is so much information, and I'm sure you experienced this with Feng Shui. There's so much information out there. And because it's so ancient, things have changed, modernized, just overall just evolved, that there's just so many different ways you can approach things, I think, as well.
Yeah, and not every Feng Shui practitioner is going to agree on
Yes.
different. So that's kind of when you get into the healing arts. There's a lot of this is metaphor and interpretation, and kind of your perception of things and how you see things. So that's my experience as well.
So as I mentioned, the Vastu chakra, so we have 16 directions in Vastu, and you can see north, north, northeast, northeast, east, northeast, east, all the way around, following south, west. Each of the zones of the chakra each have the energy that encompasses that area, that governs that area. And so depending on if something is out of balance in the area of your home, so let's say in the north northeast area of your home has to do with health and immunity, right? So it has to do with the energy that then the household will feel, healthy and immune to, illnesses. Now, for example, if you have a toilet in this location, which in Vastu, toilets, when you think of toilets or washing machines, think of it as it's disposing the energy, right? But it's disposing the energy of the house just as is disposing, you're disposing from your body. That's a toilet. So that means if you had a toilet in this zone, it would be a negative effect because it would mean that you could bring in sickness and illnesses into the home. So looking at the chakra so that's how you see all like the different aspects of each of the different zones. So here's a floor plan and where we locate a Vastu chakra on it. And as you can see, the center point of the Vastu chakra is located right here. So how I come to find that is I take the perimeter of the building and make a rectangle. And I know there's no space here, but that's okay because I need to be able to include this area of the home in the square. So if you had, just a little bit piece here, or like, for example, this piece here, I'm not going to include that in my zone, in my square, because it's just a small piece. Even just this little addition, space here, I can take that out. But what I do is you find a rectangle, or you find the rectangular square shape, and then you make a cross, and that is where you locate your Vastu chakra center point, and that's where the circle comes in. Now, to find which way is north, just using Google Earth is how I found which way the cardinal direction for north is for this property, is that north faces this way. So I was able to rotate the floor plan and locate the Vastu chakra in that center point. And what the center point is also in Vastu is important to keep in mind. That's called the Brahmstan. Now, the Brahmstan is the center of the home where the energies emerge within the house. So, keeping this area of the home clear from any load bearing walls, heavy storage, heavy furniture. You want light furniture, light colored things in the center of that, because that's where the energies emerge from and then move throughout the home.
That's a window there.
Yes, it's a door, right? This is your slider.
Yeah. Does that have any implication?
So the way we look at doors, which is actually a good point, is in Vastu, we look at doors from the exterior. We never look at interior doors. It doesn't matter which way the door swings in any of the rooms, interior wise, exterior wise, but it does matter the location, which is what I should mention, what all of these 32 different zones are for doors and windows. So looking at your main entry here in this house. So we have our main entry here, which would be located in the S3 zone. The S3 zone leads to immense prosperity and abundance. So what this means is the energies that come into the home, into the entry space in this S3 zone, and because it's your main entry, and I'm assuming this entry is used often, it means that this good, prosperous, abundant energy is coming into the home. So to answer the question on these sliding doors, and it's this sliding door is the active one, this one stays solid. So this one is located in, majority of it looks like it's located in the W3 zone, which the W3 zone again leads to money, growth, and prosperity. Now, those are two good doors you want to have, but looking at a door you may not want to have out of the exterior is the one in the S6 zone. So the one that leads you here to the pantry, which leads to immense poverty. So you may think, well, that doesn't make sense if two of my exterior entrances, are in S3 and W3, and they're bringing prosperity and abundance. And now I have one in the S6, which means I could be, living in poverty. When you look at it in Vastu at a home, is the energies are coming in and out. So if one of these doors, if the S6 door, for example, is being used less frequently, that energy will then will not circulate as much through the space. So it really depends. Is this a door that you use very frequently, would you say?
The one in S6?
Yes.
It's the door to the laundry room. My husband has like projects out in S7, so he kind of goes in and out of there, but it's not by any means a main door. Even when we park in the carport, we always enter through the main entryway.
And so one of my questions too would be for you is, since moving into this home, have you noticed abundant growth, or have you noticed, financial setbacks, financial challenges? And whether you're saying, oh, we've noticed a lot of financial growth, then that makes sense. You're using that front entry to walk in. So you're bringing in that prosperity, that prosperous energy. If you were using S6 more frequently, I could see you, after living in the home for, an amount of time, facing some financial setbacks, challenges. So that's also something in Vastu, is looking at, you don't, if the energies are working, for example, if let's say you were using the S6 door a lot, and you're like, oh, but Katerina, ever since we moved in, we've had, so much abundance, we've gotten so many projects and so much work and things. It could mean you don't have to necessarily not use that door. because if things are working, we don't want to disrupt it. And sometimes the energies just happen to fix themselves for whatever reason. But like, let's look at, so you have the washer and dryer here in the south southwest zone, right? So the south southwest zone, which the zone, since we're talking about laundry, and again, thinking about laundry like the toilet, it's a disposable, it's disposing of the energy of the house. The south southwest area of the home has to do with disposal and expenditure. So it's actually very good that the washer and dryer are in this location. So that's kind of how that energies kind of offset themselves in that zone, for example.
Got it. Got it.
So that's the thing, is if you're noticing something, is, you know, whether it's finances, whether it's career issues, relationship issues, you can use Vastu principles as a way to help aid and kind of assist you in whatever challenges you are having. It's not going to change your destiny. It's not, hey, you know, if we locate the doors and windows a certain, or the doors a certain way, the space a certain way, you're going to, you know, get every project you sign up, or you're going to, you know, find the love of your life in the next day. It doesn't work like that, but it's using the principles, these energies, to kind of help assist. And if you have the Vastu principle, the energies aligned properly in your home, when those challenging times come, you know, they don't come as hard or as challenging or as difficult, depending on whatever zone that's in. So then how in Feng Shui would you approach locating your kind of directions?
In Feng Shui, looking at the floor plan, for me, it's kind of the third step. I do about a 2-mile radius of the property, and do like an assessment of the landforms, whether they are natural or built landforms. So the streets, are they by freeways? Are they near any cemeteries? Are they, you know, is there a mountain range nearby? Are there any natural bodies of water? So kind of considering that in the greater area, and what are some of the impacts of the greater area on this space. And then I look at actually the lot, the actual piece of property, and looking at what type of landscape is going on the actual property itself, to look at the impacts and the balance of that. And then I get to the actual home. Once I get to the floor plan of the home, I first kind of just look at it really generally and look at the balance of it. So I drew an axis here, and essentially and again, we're looking from the entrance versus considering this from compass directions. So first of all, I'm going to look what's going on in this front portion of the house. So looking at this front part of the house, which again, considering energy, this would be considered the yang part, the yang space of the house, which is, you know, bright energy. If you're thinking of yin and yang, it's going to be the white, that little white tail on the yin yang circle. So this is about bright, it's activity. So you want more yang aspects in the front of your house, public spaces, living spaces, things that maybe guests are going to have access to, whereas the back of the house is primarily the yin spaces. So in this floor plan, we do have a bedroom right here, which is occupying mostly a yang area of the house. And then these 2 bedrooms have some buffer from all of this yang energy that's coming into the house. So I could argue that these bedrooms are kind of placed at the back of the house. And then this bedroom is also at the back of the house. This bedroom serves as my office, which I'm sitting in right now. And typically you would want a home office in a yang part of the house, because that's considered street facing, and you're seeing the opportunities driving by. A big thing about Feng Shui is metaphor, is seeing your space through metaphor. So this metaphor of an office being front and center, one of the first things that you access, and a bedroom occupying like the rear of the house that's maybe not frequented by guests or something. So that's one of the first considerations that I look at, is just kind of check out what's going on in the yang and the yin spaces of the house. The second thing I do is then look at the house balanced right and left. So in a lot of energetic traditions, they consider the left side is the feminine side, or the receiving side, and then the right side is the masculine side, or the projecting side. So that's also the case with Feng Shui. So it's looking at the house and looking at this right side of the house, which would be considered the masculine side. And then again, looking at the right side. And both of these are pretty balanced. Like I've had clients who have had, if this is the floor plan, maybe like 6 or 8 rooms here, and then this left side is really spacious. So what is the metaphor for that? The metaphor for that, or maybe in their lot, like there's a lot going on, or there's a lot of spaciousness on one side of the property and everything else is crammed on the other side of the property. So then you ask the question, or you listen to the clients, and is the female experiencing like overwhelm, or do they feel like they don't have enough time in the day? Kind of looking at that dynamic. So in this floor plan, that aspect is pretty balanced. The rooms are relatively spacious, and not one side feels more cramped than the other. Then I get to the bagua, which is this. And again, looking at it, so this blue grid here is the bagua. In Feng Shui, we like regular shapes. So we like squares, we like octagons, we like rectangles, and we size the bagua to what is the majority of the house space. And then from there, we either get what we call bonus spaces or missing areas. So in this case, I have excluded this bedroom and this part of the bathroom because here's the entrance, and the bagua is laid right at the entrance, and it goes to the end of this back wall. It goes to the end of this back wall, and it does not include this because this line here at the bedroom is less than 50%, significantly less than 50% of the length of this entire back wall. So if the plan went like this, I would include that entire pink area, and then this would be a missing area. But that's not the case. So what we have is our regular rectangle, and then we have this big bonus space, this little bonus space, and this little bonus space. Yes, this is my home, and yes, there are several infractions, which in Feng Shui, infractions are essentially like things that you need to fix or remedy. One of the biggest infractions in our home is one of the greatest, what we think is one of the greatest features as well. And we have a massive sliding glass door and full, full floor to ceiling windows as soon as you step in the front, as soon as you step inside. The metaphor for that in Feng Shui is all of the energy is then shooting right out to the backyard. So there's a quote, I think it's Tony Robbins, and he says, energy flows where attention goes. And that is totally the case in Feng Shui. So I often tell clients, I'm like, where is your attention going? Where is your eye being drawn? Because your attention then is like chi, that's the energy. So for us, we open up the front door, we're immediately looking at the backyard, which does not promote chi being kind of like encompassed and nourished in our space. So I thought it was interesting, Katerina, when you were talking about, kind of this wealth aspect. And it's funny because one of the metaphors for this is money entering and quickly leaving your house. This can also represent overwhelm. It can represent several different things, but one of the things would be like money comes easily, but it goes easily. So that would be one of the representations for this type of infraction, which since we've moved here, that's definitely happened several times. Like money has really come easily and then money goes easily. As you know, making changes in your home, and especially if you have a partner, it requires both partners to agree on something. So it can be a harmonious change. So my husband and I have been negotiating what is the remedy for this big infraction of what's called rushing chi from our front yard to our backyard. What we've settled on, what we're going to do is basically hanging a big, not too big, it can't like obscure, people can't run into it, it can't be too obnoxious, but hanging an art piece or a light there that will essentially draw your attention kind of inside the space instead of straight out of the window. So that's a remedy. Another infraction that we have that's very traditional kind of Feng Shui infraction, and I don't know how much weight I put on it, is the fact that from the entrance, we can see the stove. Traditional Chinese Feng Shui, they put a lot of importance on the stove, and it's a sign of health and wealth. So the idea is that if somebody can see your stove from the entrance, it can be easier for your health and your wealth to get stolen. I mean, we've been pretty healthy, grateful for that. And again, there's kind of been this fluctuation of finances since we've been here. What we did as a remedy, and it just happened to work, we put a poster here that's of a Shaolin master that's kind of facing the door. We're both very much into martial arts, and it's an artistic poster, so it's aesthetically pleasing. We really like the style of it, and the representation, again, the symbology of that is that we have somebody protecting our health and our wealth. So as soon as you look at the door, instead of being drawn to the stove, then your eyes a little bit more drawn to this artwork, and it's this very protective, symbolic artwork. So those are a couple of big major infractions. So as far as the elements go, this entrance area is ruled by water, and it represents career and opportunity. So this would be a water section. This whole square here is considered water. So we have done things to support the water element in that area. In Feng Shui, the hallways are considered like the veins and the circulation of a home. So you want to have uncluttered hallways. We happen to have dogs that love to lay in this hallway and look out the windows. So again, another infraction that I don't know if is going to change anytime soon. We've tried to bring more water element in there is, the dogs, which is fire energy, it's essentially bringing fire energy into this big space of water, which is not necessarily what you want. You either want metal energy, which we've done, we've painted the wall gray, which is metal energy, kind of to help balance, this presence of dogs and dog beds in the hallway. I'm not sure how the elements relate in Vastu. Is north water? Are you aware?
North is water.
Okay.
North is water. North, northeast. So actually, before we touch base on the elements, I did want to talk about. It's interesting because in Vastu as well, one comment I wanted to say about this floor plan is because you're so much south, you have so many south facing windows that in Vastu the energy comes from the north and the northeast, and then you want it to stay in the house and circulate throughout the house. But in your home, it is leaving through the south, especially through those windows, and also you're getting harsh south and west sunlight. So it means that the energy is soaking out through that south. So it's very interesting. I saw the similarities there as well. I don't see any connection between the front yard and the backyard and just being able to see the two in Vastu, but the fact that the energies come out of the south is very interesting.
Okay. Interesting. Yeah. We this whole wall is windows, and then there's big windows here and here, and
it's great in Vastu.
And a big slider there to bring energy in.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
You want as many openings as possible in the north and the east, and you want thicker mass, less openings. So, and it's great that you brought up remedies. The remedies you can do for, the south facing windows, like in the music room along that south wall, is curtains. Of course, we all need light, we need air, there's that quality to it. But, when it is that harsh afternoon light, putting some sort of curtains or blinds or shades that kind of don't let that harsh sunlight in and let that energy flow out.
Got it. Okay, cool. Very similarly because bathrooms are yin energy. So yin is, this heavier energy. Again, a couple of major infractions that we have. So the representation of, or the metaphor for bathrooms is that it's draining and flushing. So here, this is our wealth and abundance gua. And we have a bathroom in wealth and abundance. And again, that's the metaphor for that is that it's flushing wealth, flushing abundance. And this is a wood gua. So even though water supports wood, we would want to mitigate some of this flushing and draining. We also have drains here. And then the bathroom here, not as impactful. We've done a little bit of remedy to it, but it's just not as big of an impact. Another impact, however, this is also a wood gua, is the stove. Fire is essentially in the wood gua, so fire drains wood. And then our fireplace here is in an earth gua, which is supportive for earth. So drains certainly are impactful in Feng Shui as well.
Yeah, and in Vastu, we only look at toilets. We don't look at sinks.
Okay.
it's mostly toilets and just and like washing machines, anything that kind of spins as well.
Oh,
Uh,
okay, interesting.
so it's not, doesn't matter about sinks, but it's interesting that you brought up the bathroom in this bathroom, which has to do with, it's in the west southwest zone, which that has to do with savings and education. And because the toilet is mostly located there, so we don't care about where the shower is or where the bathtub or the sink is, but where the toilet is, it's in that west southwest. So it does make sense that you are having, although you're gaining money through some of the different area, the entrance, for example, that main entrance, that you are losing money also because of that toilet, because it's in that savings and education zone. So, and there's certain remedies that you can do, of course, by adding color, depending on what the zone is. But one of the remedies, for example, for that toilet is using you can buy a 1 inch wide by like 1 millimeter, 2 millimeters, super thin metal band, like metal, you can find them on Amazon. And it depends on what zone it is. You would use a 1 inch wide by like 1 millimeter thick aluminum band. And you would, if you're looking at the floor plan of the toilet, what you would do is you would place the band around the toilet and into the wall. But you would have it so it's 1 inch thick, so it'd be vertical, and then you would groove into the ground, so where like the grout is. And then you would have, because you're energetically using this metal, you're energetically removing that toilet from the home.
I see. I see.
And so here's the toilet in floor plan, and here's your wall, your stud wall. So you would have that band go all the way around vertically in the grout, and that's how you would help remedy that toilet,
Okay.
which is very interesting. I
Yeah.
don't know if you, our toilet at my house is in the center of the space in the Bromston, and that has to do with financial issues and digestion issues. One of the remedies is to not use that restroom as often. That also is something. The less you use it, same as like using the doors and entrance, like the doors, the less you use them or the less time you spend in that space, the less of that energy you kind of accumulate. And that kind of goes to, I would like to also talk about sleeping in bedrooms and which way you sleep directionally. I'd be very curious to learn about that in Feng Shui. But going to the element theory, so it's the north-northwest to the northeast that is the water element. And then the east-northeast, the east-southeast all have to do with air. Because in a way you're creating, you have, so first it has to do with about like life on Earth. And we need water, we need air. And then as you're creating life, then you need fire, you need warmth. So fire is southeast, south, 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 all the way to the south. So that is your fire element zone. And then there's earth, which is just this area, the southwest and the south-southwest. So that has to do with earth. And then this has to do with space. Now there's certain Vastu Shastra that you learn, depending on also where in India you're learning about Vastu, where it's simplified. Here's your water, here's your fire, your earth, and here's your air, which is like also space. So it kind of does shift a little bit differently, which this is one thing I've noticed now as I've been diving deeper and deeper into Vastu. It really depends where, what part of the country you're learning from, and if you're doing the traditional Vastu or more of a modernized Vastu. And I don't mean, 2020, 2023 modern, like, the newest and latest, greatest technology, but just within this last century. Because even looking at in architecture, when you look back, 150 years ago, the toilet used to not be in a home, right? It was in an outhouse away from the house. Then when indoor plumbing was introduced, now all of these Vastu principles had to adjust, had to change, because now we have a toilet in the house, in the energetic field of the home. And it's that disposal, which sounds like in Feng Shui as well, it's seen as that disposal of the energy. So it's kind of, you always have to look at the space and see if there's issues with it. And then seeing if you need to apply to certain principles. But then, so going back to the element theory, those are the kind of different the element zones. But what I wanted to talk about is, you would think that having a koi pond, which here's the water element, right? We said to the north northwest all the way to the northeast. You would think having a koi pond and a hot tub would be very good here, but it goes back to that the water is moving. The fish in the koi pond are causing kind of a turbulence in the water, so that's actually not good. As well as the rushing of the waterfall, it is good in a way because it is the water element, but then ideally you wouldn't want the waterfall running as well as often, maybe having it on, but not having it run like continuously, and seeing if there's an effect. And again, if you don't notice that, while you run the waterfall, you're having to deal with, the north northeast has to do with health and immunity, the north has to do with money and opportunity. So if you're, again, there's, noticing that money aspect, if it changes, if you're noticing, there are money issues, it could be while you're running the waterfall, for example.
Interesting. Is there any kind of aspect of like arguing elements or conflicting elements within the space? So again, there's the water in the water, but what about stoves, fireplaces? Because what our fireplace would then be, is that also in water?
Let's see, I think your fireplace,
Yeah, that's the fireplace.
that would be an air.
Oh, so that's an air. Okay, so what would
So
be the relationship then between the fire and the air? Or does that
so
not matter?
it's okay because the water, you have oxygen in water, right? So it's air. So that's fine because they correlate. Then you
Okay.
have fire. You wouldn't want to mix water elements in fire because the water then would cause issues with the fire, which it
Right.
sounds like in feng shui as well.
Yeah.
But because you have the fireplace in the air element area, it's not fine. In order to rebalance that space, you could bring in more. You wouldn't want to bring in more fire elements, so like orange or red colors, for example, or like a copper color. You wouldn't want to bring any of that in. You would want to bring some water elements. So one thing is mirrors, because mirrors look like a reflection, like water. Bringing in a mirror, for example, would be good to bring into that zone to kind of help balance that energy. And that has to do with the east zone, because it's mostly in the east zone. And east zone has to do with social association, which mostly has to do, if you were someone who is in politics, this is an area of the home we would want to make sure is very balanced, because you're running for office, you want to, win the positions that you're running for, and you want to have a good social association to your community. So that would be something to balance. But going to the stove, because in the kitchen, we look at the stove. Now, the stove is in the earth element, because by now we're, let's see, by now, so up to here. So here's the fire element here, and then it was to the west southwest. This was earth. Oops, the earth zone. And it's okay to have the stove. Well, it's okay because it's in the earth zone, but what in Vastu we want to look at first is the zone that it's in, and then what that has to do, how it's associated with. So it's in the south southwest zone, which has to do with that disposal and expenditure. So it's fine to be in this. There's no really issue. If it was more in the southwest area of the home, which has to do with skill and relationship, specifically relationships, if you and your partner were really arguing, or your husband were arguing a lot, then I would say we need to move the stove. But again, it's in that disposal expenditure, and it's in the earth zone, so there's no really issues with that stove.
It's fascinating.
Yeah, it is.
Oh yeah, so one more thing with the water. with Feng Shui, we don't want stagnant water. We do want moving water. And it's always important when you have a water feature outside the home that the direction of the water is flowing towards the home and not away from the home. Because again, it's this idea of bringing energy into the home. So if the waterfall is facing away from the home, then the energy is being directed away from the home. So that's, yeah. And then because we have a lot of water, the koi pond is essentially just outside of our fire space. The remedy for that is, number one, the koi fish, because animals are seen as fire energy. No matter where in the house they are, they're considered fire energy. And then also, again, considering the Wu Jing, the elemental cycles, all of the greenery that's surrounding the pond helps to soak up some of that water energy and then feed the fire. So that's a remedy in Feng Shui as far as having, water in the fire zone, is to just have a lot of greenery around that.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And it's so nice that I like that you balance everything as well with elements and with just subtleness. Like it's I think that's the power to it as well, as you don't have to, and for anyone listening, you don't have to, buy a plot of land and start from scratch. There's ways you can, like you did in your home, just remedying a few things, and it's just subtle changes can have a major shift on energy.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. And I think one of the most important parts, which kind of speaks to what you're, just saying, but it's that the clients like it. If you're putting in remedies just to put in a remedy, or some very traditional, aspects of Feng Shui will indicate that there's only a specific remedy that can be there. And that might be really right for the client, but it might feel super awkward for the client too. Like they just don't resonate with a bagua mirror on their outside door. It doesn't feel like their door. So for me, that's not good Feng Shui. It's good Feng Shui if the people really can absorb it into their lives and it feels like it's part of their home, and it feels like it's something supportive in their living space, rather than, something that was just tacked on for an energetic reason.
Just check box, got it done.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, definitely resonate with that as well.
And that's another thing with practicing an ancient practice that's not of this culture, and then bringing it here and making some adaptations for it to be more current and for it to be applicable to kind of the tastes and the sensibilities that are in this region. So,
absolutely.
Yeah.
One thing I also wanted to ask is, because you have another, house or another structure on the property, you would be in Vastu, for example, you would think, why didn't I include this building when I was looking at the center for my Vastu chakra? And the reason I wasn't looking at it is because it's not connected internally. If there was an internal hallway and this was from on the interior space, like a conditioned space, then I would have to include it. And so then my rectangle would get much, much larger, right?
Interesting.
And then that would also change. Now all of a sudden, the center is here, so all of the zones would be changed differently. So there's fluidity. It's not very structured, because energy isn't structured. It moves around us. So but one thing I was curious about for the bedroom and for sleeping in Feng Shui, does that at all have any impact where the location of the bedroom is, or where the location of where your head is sleeping? Because in Vastu, what we look at is wherever the head is. So wherever, so here in the master bedroom, we're in the east northeast zone, which has to do with like fun and recreation. So sleeping here would mean you want to have a lot of, and your heads are here, both of your heads. It would mean that you're kind of lazy in a way. Like you want to have fun, you want to go on vacation, you just want to just have fun in life. And so that's kind of that energy. And you can, if you spend a lot of time in this area, so let's say you were, you sleep there at night, which it's not ideal, but you'd want to be sleeping elsewhere because it could make you like lazy.
Interesting. It's definitely a consideration in compass method. And even before I started practicing Feng Shui, I would research. I'd be like, okay, what direction should I be sleeping? What direction should my husband be sleeping? And in Compass Method, I'm not aware if there's like a standard direction that they recommend the head should face, but I know it's personalized. So, and that can change every year. So I remember one year I looked it up, and like my husband and I are never going to be, maybe like once every 6 years, we're going to have the same beneficial sleeping directions. And so I just kind of threw it out the window, because I'm like, we're not going to change our bed direction every year, and we're not going to be sleeping different directions. And again, it is, primarily like a compass method, and also, an astrological, so I don't, as far as I'm aware, there's not a typical recommended direction that's just general. That's not person specific.
Got it. Yeah. So in Vastu, you want your head to be in the south with your feet in the north because of the
Okay.
electromagnetic waves of the globe. So that's interesting.
And that's a lot of times recommended for healing practitioners. So you want your head in the south?
Head in the south.
Head in the south. Okay. And that's how when I have clients over and I do sound therapy on them, their head is facing south. Okay. So that's good. Feng Shui is a little bit more concerned, at least BTB is a little bit more concerned with what's called command position. And that is command position with a desk, command position with a bed, command position with your, like, if there's a chair that you always hang out in. And command position is similar to this concept of prospect and refuge that's talked about in biophilic design. And essentially that is okay, so this desk is in somewhat of command position, not totally, because I have a window behind me. So ideally you have a solid wall behind you. You have a view of the door, but you're not in line with it. This kind of harkens back to tens of thousands of years ago when we were hunters and gatherers and out there hunting. And if you have a greater sense of security, if you're not afraid that something's going to sneak up behind you, and you can see threats or opportunity coming your way. So that's kind of the impact of command position. It was funny because my desk used to be facing the other way, where my back was to the wall. I had a smaller desk. I was like, oh no, it's fine. It's fine. And my Feng Shui teacher was like, no, you really need to move that desk. And I was like, yeah, I know. And I did. And it was just amazing how much, it wasn't so much like this aspect of security for me, but it was seeing this opportunity in front of me instead of having my desk kind of facing the wall, just being able to see out in front. So with the bed, that is the same thinking, that you want to have a solid wall at your head, and then you want to be able to see the door. And I always, like, we don't expect that an intruder is going to come in our house, right? But if you had the door right in front of you, something is going to come straight at you, whereas you have a little bit more time to react if you can see something coming from the side. There's also the thinking about, you don't want the door to be in line with the bed, and then it will, like, the energy can kind of cut your feet off, because it's energetically, obviously it's not going to physically cut your feet off, but this aspect that there might be more tendency for like injury or joint pain or physical body pain anytime there's this quick motion of energy through your body. So especially when you're sleeping, if the chi is coming in, and let's say there's a wall in the middle, a door in the middle of the wall, and that door is in line with your legs or your knees, this thinking that the energy is going to come through quickly and it's kind of coasting over your knees all the time, there could be a bigger tendency for joint pain in that area.
So it's similar in Vastu when it comes to your desk. And like, so the way I'm facing is I'm facing a wall. And so the door is behind me. And so same kind of concept is, if you're facing with, the door is behind your back, it could mean someone is going to, like an intruder or someone is going to come behind you. Or it could also mean like a business partner is going to be doing some shady stuff because you don't know what's happening behind your back.
Right.
So a remedy is to have a mirror. And so I actually have a little mirror right here by my desk, so I can see if someone were to enter, and that's kind of a remedy to help with that because I have the door behind me. So it's very interesting, and it's very similar in the way that the space that we occupy it has our energy in it. It has the energy of the different objects, of the light coming in, that we really affect that energy. And so it's really interesting what you were saying. And I wanted to touch on too in Vastu is, so we talked about the directions are very important, but the zone would proceed. So you first have to look at the zone and then the direction. So for example, in my apartment, I knew in Vastu you have to sit, it's great to sit facing east when you meditate and have that energy coming in, and it's so great. And I had a perfect spot by the edge of my bed where I could see the morning sun and looking out the window, and it was just perfect. But I was sitting in the east southeast zone of my house, which has to do with a lot of anxiety. And I would notice, even though I meditated, I felt really anxious. And so I changed the location. So I actually sit right here by my desk. I still look facing east. I still look out at the trees and the sunlight and everything, but I'm sitting in the mind and clarity zone, which is the northeast area. And now I'm finally feeling like a little more clarity, and I'm not feeling as much anxiety as I would had I was I sitting when I was sitting back in like the anxious zone. So the zone takes precedence over the direction as far as when you're sitting and facing somewhere.
Okay.
Like,
Okay.
that's what I meant.
It's so
Yeah.
interesting, and it's so neat to see the effects of it. And I mean, to feel the effects of it. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And like going back to the fountain, so I had a fountain here by my desk because I thought, oh, my husband built this beautiful fountain for me. And I was like, oh, it's the water element. I'm going to put a fountain here. But there's a little lotus flower that spins in the fountain. And so there you have that like motion in the water. And I recently moved the fountain to the anxiety, the east southeast area of the home. And I've noticed that means because it's kind of in it's brought in like financial abundance because I've moved that fountain to a different zone. So like,
Interesting.
and so I have a question about feng shui is, like in Vastu, the effects, there's no, if you move something, I move the fountain, then tomorrow I'm going to see results. It takes time. It can take weeks, months before you notice that shift. In feng shui, is there any sort of time you can expect to see results after you do remedies?
I mean, I've had clients have things shift really quickly, and
Mhm.
I've had clients have things, not shift as quickly. So, I mean, one recent client, and that's where for me, another, and feng shui in general is, um, how is the chi of the clients? Is their chi really robust? Is it strong? Because that's another thing. Like if clients typically have maybe, and I don't want to say weaker chi, they might notice some, they or like diminished chi. They might notice some impacts that somebody with more robust chi would not notice at all. So, and that could be the same with changes. I think another huge part is, how is the client absorbing those changes, and how is the client working with those changes and recommendations that you've made? I'm actually going to be doing an interview with a neuroscientist on kind of comparing like feng shui remedies and with neural pathways. There's this whole process with applying a feng shui remedy where you engage like your body, your mind, and your spirit, and you're putting intention into it and everything. And after, some people will be like, oh, placebo effect, magic tricks, whatever. And I'm a big proponent of magic tricks and placebo effect. And it's like, great, because that can really, really be effective. And, but kind of thinking on a scientific level, I was like, that's a little bit like creating a new neural pathway, because you moving, depending upon what you did around that shift of you moving that fountain into this area that represents wealth and income and abundance and things. And if you put intention into that, and if you look at that, and that it makes you feel supported in this aspect, then how is your outlook to the world? Like, how is that going to slightly change your behaviors? So I think that's another big part is the buy-in, essentially, of how much clients are really absorbing and putting their own energy into the changes. There's not so to answer your question, no, there's not like, oh, this is going to happen tomorrow, or it's going to happen 6 months from now. From my experience, it's different for kind of based on what the clients, how they're operating within the space as well. And
No,
I think
and that makes
timing in
sense.
general,
Yeah.
yeah.
No, Absolutely. No, and that makes sense. I think that's something too clients always want to let them know is like this is and like I said earlier, like this is Foster's not going to change, just because you arrange something doesn't mean all of a sudden you're going to get this abundance or your relationship's going to change because the energies we can't see them, they're not tangible, so we can't control them as well. So we can kind of help and guide them. And that's kind of what it seems like, both Feng Shui, Vastu principles as well, whatever, you resonate with, that'll kind of help, you'll guide that energy as well.
Mm-hmm. Vastu is best practiced on new constructions.
It's both.
Okay.
So I've been very fortunate enough. I have a project actually in Canada where the clients are building a house from ground up and we're starting from scratch, from zero, which is like best case
Yeah.
scenario.
Yeah.
You can put things where you want them, where they should be. You don't have to figure out remedies and start, like Tetrising. It's like a game of Tetris sometimes. Like, well, if I do this, then this happens, and it's a domino effect. So I'm very fortunate. I have a project that I'm working on where we're going straight from scratch, just building a house because it's more of a rural part of Canada. There's no setback. It's not like here in Southern California, Orange County, where, you have like 2 foot, setbacks and you have to be within the confines of the zoning regulations. So that's just has been a dream project. I do also look at, I've been offering consultations for existing layouts. Like if you're noticing that there's something wrong in your house or your layout, like I recently actually had a friend reach out to me. She's like, I just moved into this new house. Can you please look at the floor plan? Something feels really off. And so I looked at the floor plan and I'm like, there were so many things coming up for like depression and anxiety. And I'm like, do you notice the space that you sleep in, the space that you work in, the way the energy is flowing into your house? Like, have you been noticing a lot of anxiety and depression since moving into this house? She's like, absolutely. And I kind of even noticed it because we work together and I'm just like, that's that energy. So we're finding remedies. It's an existing house. She moved in. She can't move the walls. Like, for example, I'm a big component of using Vastu principles in a way for like renters. I rent, so I can't start painting walls and moving walls and shifting things. So are there ways to remedy by adding color, by adding materials, or moving like just even the little fountain, moving that. Moving plants around. I just moved, our money tree was dying downstairs. I just moved it upstairs and put it in the north zone, which has to do with money and opportunity, and it's flourishing. And also I've noticed we've been, I signed up a project this week after moving it, and it's
Congrats.
it's it's yeah, it's thank you. So it's yeah, you make these subtle shifts and changes. And I think also without going full blown, let's remodel the entire house, that also causes as a disruption in the energy, right? Because you're removing walls, I mean, anybody who is remodeling their home knows that during construction it's a mess. It's a lot going on. It can cause frustrations in the household, so we kind of want to avoid that as well. So there's ways you can look at existing floor plans and finding certain remedies, kind of like you're looking at your space and the way that your entry and the back door, they're open. So we can't move our entry. You don't want to relocate the entry, so you're looking at ways to remedy it by putting in that light fixture, for example. So there's ways. Obviously, it's great when you can get a project from the ground up, but those are far and few in between.
Yeah. Yes. Same here. It's, it was funny when I was working with an architect and I'm like, oh yeah. And I recommended to the clients to put a big piece of artwork on this wall. So it doesn't feel like you're, leaving the stairs and just, walking into a wall. And also this is in their creativity zone and they're creative people. And, I didn't want them to feel like their creativity was blocked. And then he's like, well, why don't we put a window there? And I'm like, yeah, let's put a window there because we can. So that's the fun part about working with things from the ground up, is you can make those, those structural changes, or those, the window schedule changes or something like that, without just being like, okay, hang up some artwork or change the color, which can be really, really helpful. Like color is obviously a massive, super impactful thing for, energy and space, concept of space and everything.
No, I know. Color's a whole another topic for sure.
Yeah.
And in Vastu, it has to do, the easy way to remember the color is kind of depending on the element theory.
Mm.
where you are. So obviously like the fire zone, reds, oranges are good. You know, you've got earth, you've got the earth tones, water, you know, more like a bluish tone. So that's kind of a good way to remember that, and inviting, you know, those elements depending on if you feel that imbalance in this.
I'm going to pull up the real quick. I'm going to pull up the element chart for Feng Shui. And I'm curious to see if there's kind of some of the similar thinking, just because I have practiced Ayurveda in the past. And so I know about, you know, balancing like Vata Pitta Kapha. So here, this is called Wu Jing, and people often call it the 5 elements. What it actually means is the 5 phases, because we don't see the elements as a static object or material. For instance, we see the elements as part of a cycle and the relationships between these phases. So water feeds wood, wood feeds fire. When a fire is extinguished, it becomes earth, ash. Earth contains metal, and metal nourishes water. Metal creates water through condensation, but it also nourishes water in the sense of minerals. But everything else is pretty obvious as far as this, so we call this the creative cycle, going in this direction from water, wood, fire, earth, metal. This is the creative cycle because each element nourishes the next. So this in the middle is considered the controlling cycle. And in Feng Shui, we don't want to use the controlling cycle as like a fast, quick fix, but it should also be a temporary fix where, okay, if there's a big problem and it needs to be solved quickly, we're going to add a controlling element to it, but we're also going to deal with it quickly. And that might be a temporary thing that you remove 3 to 6 months later once things have been resolved. And in the meantime, you also add like the nourishing element. So in this case, in any case, like more wood nourishes wood. Water also nourishes wood. The Wu Jing process, the relationships between the phases and cycles. We also apply this to our clients all the time. And again, I've got a background in Ayurveda, so I've been working with elements as an archetypal system for people and looking at problems and imbalances and relationships in terms of this. So it was just a little bit of a shift for me to go from like Vata Pitta Kapha to using Wu Jing. I think it's very intuitive as well. In my client intakes, I do a couple of different assessments based on their birth date and also based on a questionnaire to see what their major elements are. So in the case of their floor plan then, and in spaces of the home, so for instance, both my husband and I are our birth dates and our personalities, we are both wood fire people. We both happen to be wood fire people. So wood and fire elements are going to be supportive for both of us, kind of no matter where they are in the house, because we have a tendency to, you know, gravitate to that, specifically wood. Like we can't have enough plants and trees and things surrounding us. So the wood element, even if it was in a water space, which is draining for water, could be considered supportive to us because we live there and it nourishes our personal chi. We would want to be careful for sure about having too much wood in a water space. However, again, unless we're, you know, just having a ton of career and opportunity coming our way, then it's fine. You can have a lot of wood there. For us, we have it pretty balanced. We also have a good amount of metal element in our CONVO, which is career and opportunity, because metal supports water. And then this is, again, the Bagua, and in BTB, it's this, what's called the Con line is always aligned to where the entrance of the home is. And the entrance to the home can be in any one of these 3 guas. Each of these squares is considered a gua. This is one version of the Bagua. The much more traditional version of the Bagua, you've probably seen it. It's an octagon. So it's an octagonal shape, which is similar to this. And then this area with the 9th space being in the center. And that's also either an octagon or a circle. So, you know, this happens to really work with most floor plans in the West because you don't run into many octagonal houses.
And this is so similar in Vastu. There's exactly the 9 boxes, so that there is a form of Vastu you can study that has these 9 zones, and they are very simple. You know, it still goes based off of the directions, but it's more of a square shape. So that's interesting that you brought up that in the Western culture, because it's very interesting too that we both practice in like where we have Western architecture, and so we have to apply it's kind of a interesting way to approach projects. But going back to the element theory and the weeing. So in Vastu, it's very similar. There's a creation, and then there's a reduction. So there's a creation where it goes to water to air to fire to earth to space. And that's kind of the circle of creation. And then there's a circle of reduction. So if you go backwards, if you go water to space to earth to fire to air, and as long as you are putting elements into like their neighboring element, so fire and earth and fire and air can be related, but it's once you start crossing, like you show in yours where you start crossing across lines, like you don't want to put fire into water, water into fire. That's where the imbalances are going to happen. You don't want to put space into air because then you're adding more kind of space into air and vice versa. So there's definitely ways that you can balance the zones, but a good thing to know is what is the neighboring element, and then can you reduce it. So if the zone seems imbalanced in a way where you need to create more of, like, let's say your fire zone, it's imbalanced, then you can add air, or to help reduce that energy you can add earth.
Okay.
So that's kind of how it goes back and forth in that sense.
That's cool. It's very similar. And when I started comparing the element systems with each other, because obviously we have wood and metal, and then you have space and air, and this kind of goes beyond the scope of what we're talking about, but a lot of the like ether or space qualities, from my understanding, would align with some of these metal characteristics. But when we get to the air aspect, especially when we're talking about like Vata, Pitta, Kapha, the wood element definitely has some air characteristics, but it has a lot of Pitta characteristics, which is fire. Because wood is kind of seen as, it's considered the pioneer. So, okay, so that might be a little bit air in the sense that, looking forward and creative, expansive thinking and things like that. But wood type people can be very driven, very eye on the prize, very much of kind of that Pitta control, like directive aspect, which is not which, and again, Pitta is fire. So I don't know and so I appreciate your like kind of reflections on this. And in Feng Shui, the fire element it's got a lot more of this like sensuality, fun, excitement. It's considered like the wizard, so like this magical aspect to it, and it's like this flickering aspect. So like a fire person might quickly respond, like you ask them if they want to go do something, like, oh yeah, totally, and then they didn't really think it through. They just kind of quickly have this very sharp, quick reaction, and then they end up doing something else, which is not a Pitta characteristic. So it was interesting for me to a little bit reframe these elements, and because I was like, oh yeah, well, wood would be similar to air because it's breezy, and a lot of the structures within an airspace.
No, it's very interesting. And I just remember too, in as well in Vastu, and looking and thinking about the body and like the elements within the body is, the fire is in our bodies, like our digestion, right? It's the heat. And so one of the good places to have a kitchen is in the fire element zone in Vastu, because that's also, the kitchen is where you're getting your nourishments, where you're getting, you're cooking the food, if we go, back to when we cooked with fire, that would be a great place to have a kitchen. And so you kind of tap into, those different aspects of like the physical body and how it relates to the home. So like, having, for example, like in the air element, thinking about air conditioning and fans and heating and things like that. So, or not heating, but like air conditioning. So that has to do with like the air element. So there's definitely ways those relate.
Yeah, there's so many layers to it.
It is.
Yeah, and you can't, and I don't know if you notice this as well, but it's like I always have asked clients to focus on anywhere from 2 to 4 intentions and stick to that. Like, what's the most important? I kind of equate it to, I love acupuncture, and when you go to an acupuncturist, you can just tell them everything that's going on wrong, and they'll they'll put it in a priority, right? They're not gonna address everything at once. And in feng shui, we don't want to address everything at once, because you want to see how the major priorities are gonna impact and work it out, and then see what happens in the other areas of the home. If you just try to address everything all at once, like there can be some negative effects from that, just because you're maybe changing things that don't need to be changed. So it really is, just going through what are your priorities for this space, like your top 2 to 4, and you really don't need to feng shui the entire space, but take care of the major infractions, take care of their intentions, let things shake out a little bit and see what the results are. And also doing changes kind of incrementally. I mean, even within that prioritization, doing a couple things, seeing what happens, doing a couple of other things and seeing what happens. Is that kind of how you approach it as well?
Absolutely, because it becomes a domino effect.
Yeah.
You change one area of the home, or you do a remedy, and that could affect something else that you weren't expecting. And so I think making those little changes one by one, and that happens if you're looking at an existing home. Obviously, if we're at a home that's already, that's brand new construction, well then and that's another thing too, is once the home is built and clients then move in, after a while, letting them settle into the place, let the energies after construction kind of settle, let the dust settle, the energy settle, let the people move into their home, and then kind of coming back in a little bit, hey, did you notice something? Or because also in Vastu it has to do with your astrological signs and your
Mm.
Vedic, so that also has to play into effect. So it's a lot. There's a lot that goes into it. It's not just a simple equation. You're having this issue. It's not like I'm going to write a prescription and all your problems will be solved. There's definitely ways, you have to go about it in a sustainable way as well.
Is there a concept? There's a concept in feng shui and it's called predecessor chi. So that would be who lived in the space before you, and what was what is the energy of basically what is the history of the building. Is that considered for you when you're working with clients who've been living in their space for a while? Do you ever ask who
So
lived here before?
I do ask how long you've lived in the space. I know
Mm-hmm.
that's why I asked you. And also, do you rent or own? Because obviously that means, are you planning on staying in this home for a while?
Okay.
Permanent solution, or do you want just hey, we're going to live in this space for a few years, and then like for example me, I'm renting. There's no way I'm going to live here for the next 20 years. I mean, I hope hope one day to buy a home, but so I would look at a temporary fix, not a permanent fix
Got
as
it.
well. But I think looking back on who previously lived here, that would be more of a little bit more on like the spiritual kind of the deities, the plant,
Mm-hmm.
a little bit of different aspect of Vastu, where I look more at kind of the practical structure of it as well.
I
But yeah,
see.
it's like you said, there's layers. And
Mm-hmm.
how deep do you want to go, and how specific, and then who do you talk to, from what part of India, from what part of the world, where did they learn, and then how has that practice evolved? Like you said, there's so many layers to
Yeah.
just the practices. I mean, we could spend a whole weekend retreat talking about and barely covering the surface, right?
And maybe we
Um,
will someday.